Sometimes, the deepest scars aren't left by enemies. They're left by the people you would have trusted with your life. Jane never imagined that the worst humiliation of her life would begin with a smile. It happened on an ordinary Saturday afternoon. The sun was warm, the neighborhood was quiet, and Jane was sitting on the front porch of the house she shared with her best friend. A bowl of fresh fruit rested on her lap, while a novel lay open beside her. For the first time in weeks, she felt peaceful. Then she heard the front gate open. She looked up and immediately smiled. Vivian. Her best friend had just arrived home. Walking beside her was a tall, well-dressed man Jane had never met before. He carried himself with effortless confidence, and judging from the way Vivian held his arm, Jane guessed he was the boyfriend she'd been hearing about for months. Jane stood quickly, brushed the crumbs from her dress, and walked toward them with genuine excitement. "So this is the famous Michael," she laughed. "You've been hiding him from me." For a brief second, Vivian smiled. Then everything changed. Vivian suddenly wrapped her arm around Michael's shoulder and pointed directly at Jane. "Babe," she said loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. "This is my fat friend, the one I've been telling you about." Jane's smile disappeared. Michael looked confused. Vivian wasn't finished. "I'm serious," she continued, laughing. "She eats like she's training for a world record. If food had feelings, it would probably file a restraining order against her." She burst into laughter. Jane forced a weak smile, hoping the joke would end there. Instead, it only became worse. "Sometimes I wonder how she even finds clothes her size. And don't let that innocent face fool you. If there's a buffet within 10 miles, she'll somehow smell it." Vivian laughed harder after every sentence, expecting Michael to join in. He didn't. Jane felt as if the ground beneath her feet had disappeared. Every insecurity she had carried since childhood crashed into her all at once. Her hands began to tremble. She wanted to say something. Anything. But nothing came out. Without another word, she turned around and walked back into the house as quickly as she could. The bedroom door slammed shut. Only then did the tears begin. Outside, silence replaced Vivian's laughter. Michael slowly looked at her. "What was that?" Vivian shrugged as if nothing unusual had happened. "What? The way you just spoke to your friend." "Oh, relax." Vivian rolled her eyes. "We've joked like that for years." Michael frowned. "No. That's not a joke. A joke is funny for everyone." She looked devastated. Vivian crossed her arms. "She's too sensitive." "No," Michael replied calmly. "I think you've forgotten what kindness looks like." For the first time that afternoon, Vivian's smile faded. "You can't seriously be upset over this." Michael took one step backward. "I'm not upset because of her. I'm disappointed because of you." Vivian blinked. "What are you talking about?" "I've been dating you for 3 months," Michael said. "You've always talked about loyalty, about how much you value friendship." He glanced toward the bedroom window where Jane had disappeared. "But someone who truly loves their friends would never humiliate them just to look funny." Vivian tried to laugh again. "Oh my God, you're making this way bigger than it is." Michael slowly shook his head. "No. You just showed me exactly who you are." The color drained from Vivian's face. "Wait. You don't mean..." "I do." Michael removed the small bracelet Vivian had given him a week earlier and placed it gently on the porch railing. "I don't think we should see each other anymore." Vivian stared at him in disbelief. "You're breaking up with me? Because of her?" Michael looked directly into her eyes. "No. I'm leaving because of you." Then he turned around and walked away. Vivian stood frozen. She couldn't believe she'd just lost the man she had been bragging about to everyone. Instead of feeling guilty, she felt furious. Her fists clenched. "This is Jane's fault," she whispered through gritted teeth. "If she hadn't acted like a victim, Michael would still be mine." Inside the bedroom, Jane had no idea what had just happened. She sat on the floor with her back against the bed, crying into her hands. This wasn't the first time strangers had mocked her weight. But hearing those words from the only person she considered family, that hurt differently. Jane had spent years convincing herself Vivian truly cared about her. She had ignored every rude comment, every selfish request, every moment she felt taken for granted. Because deep down, she was terrified of being alone again. She didn't realize that the friendship she was desperately trying to protect had never really existed. To Vivian, Jane was never a best friend. She was simply the easiest person to use. The next morning, Jane woke up with swollen eyes. She barely slept. The words Vivian had spoken kept replaying in her mind. My fat friend. She eats like there's no tomorrow. Every sentence echoed louder than the last. When Jane finally stepped out of her room, the apartment was silent. Vivian had already left for work without saying a single word. There was no apology, no message, no explanation, only silence. Jane stood in the empty kitchen staring at the coffee mug Vivian had left in the sink. For the first time in years, she asked herself a question she had been too afraid to ask before. Has she ever really been my friend? The question unlocked memories she had spent years trying to ignore. Everything suddenly came rushing back. It all began during their first semester at university. Back then, Jane was the quiet girl everyone noticed, but almost nobody approached. She came from a wealthy family. Her parents owned several successful businesses and made sure she never lacked anything. She drove a nice car, wore quality clothes, and never worried about tuition or rent. Yet none of those things could buy what she wanted most: acceptance. Since childhood, Jane had struggled with her weight. Every new school felt the same. The whispers, the stares, the cruel jokes disguised as harmless fun. By the time she entered university, she had already mastered the art of pretending not to care. She smiled even when people laughed. She laughed along even when the joke was about her, because crying only made people laugh harder. During lunch breaks, Jane usually sat alone beneath a large oak tree near the library. She would scroll through her phone, not because she was busy, but because pretending to text someone hurt less than admitting no one wanted to sit with her. One afternoon, while she quietly unpacked her lunch, a cheerful voice interrupted her thoughts. Mind if I sit here? Jane looked up. Standing before her was one of the prettiest girls on campus. Long black hair, a bright smile, perfect makeup, confident posture. She looked like someone who belonged in every popular group. Jane glanced around. You mean here? The girl smiled. Unless someone invisible is sitting there. Jane couldn't help laughing. Go ahead. The stranger sat down without hesitation. I'm Vivian. Jane, it's nice to meet you. For nearly an hour, they talked about classes, professors, movies, and childhood dreams. It was the easiest conversation Jane had ever had. When she returned to her dorm that evening, she couldn't stop smiling. She immediately called her mother. I think I finally made a real friend. Her mother sounded genuinely happy. You deserve good people around you, sweetheart. Jane believed she had finally found one. But Vivian's reasons for starting that friendship had nothing to do with kindness. Just 2 days earlier, Vivian had overheard several students talking in the cafeteria. That's Jane. The rich girl. I heard her parents paid for an apartment near campus. They even bought her a new car. Vivian quietly listened. Money, comfort, connections, everything she had dreamed of. Unlike Jane, Vivian grew up counting every dollar. Her father worked double shifts at a factory. Her mother sold vegetables at a roadside market before sunrise. Some months they barely had enough money to pay rent. Vivian hated being poor. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't stupid. She simply believed that life rewarded people with money, not people with kindness. That afternoon, she watched Jane sitting alone under the tree. An isolated rich girl. No close friends. No confidence. No one to protect her. To Vivian, she looked like the perfect opportunity. Over the following weeks, Vivian played her role perfectly. She remembered Jane's birthday. She defended her whenever classmates whispered. She walked with her between lectures. She even introduced Jane to a few students. Jane had never felt so accepted. For the first time in years, she stopped eating lunch alone. She laughed more. She smiled more. She finally believed someone genuinely cared about her. What she didn't know was that Vivian was performing. One evening, Vivian sat in her dorm room with 3 classmates. One of them asked the question everyone had been wondering. "Vivian, can I ask you something?" "Shoot. Why are you always hanging around Jane?" Vivian looked up from her phone. "What do you mean?" "I mean," the girl lowered her voice, "she's nice. But she's not exactly your type." The room fell quiet. Then Vivian smirked. "You really think I'm spending all that time with her because we're soulmates?" The girls exchanged confused looks. Vivian leaned back in her chair. "You girls are looking at the wrong thing." "What do you mean?" "I don't see her weight. I see her wallet." The room exploded with laughter. One girl looked shocked. "So you're using her?" Vivian shrugged without the slightest hint of guilt. "Call it whatever you want. I call it survival. If someone wants to spend money on me, why would I stop them?" Another girl laughed. "So what's the plan?" Vivian smiled confidently. "I'll stay close until I get everything I need. Then..." She snapped her fingers. "I'm gone." None of them realized. Standing just outside the hallway, a janitor had overheard every single word. He slowly shook his head, then quietly whispered to himself, "One day, that girl is going to regret treating a good heart like a bank account." Unfortunately, Jane never heard that conversation. She continued believing she had finally found the sister she'd always wanted, and every act of kindness she showed Vivian only made Vivian greedier. She had no idea. The betrayal she experienced on the porch was only the beginning. The person she trusted most was preparing to take far more than her dignity.